So welcome to Bunny's Designs. This is a live show with live peoples on a fairly bright day in the UK, but it is overcast, smidging of blue trying to poke through, probably a bit like my colour. So I've done a few of these in part one. I did some practice of watercolours. So again, that's because I didn't leave the gap. I left the gap and I didn't have any contamination between. All the pages curled, even the 638 GSM, because it wasn't stretched. But this is just a practice. They're all dried, so I'm just going to have a play with masking fluid. And again, this is because I haven't done it for a while, so I want to just kind of play a bit. And now these are not going to be white because I've already done my sky and my background. But I'm just practicing with the masking fluid first because I've drawn out a sketch of mushrooms, so it's all white. So when I put the fluid on here, I will then do the background, and that's going to give me a whiter than white. The dots on the mushrooms, I forgot what they're called. So I'm going to tiny ones for this one, and I'm going to let them dry. I've done a very quick tester to see if this masking fluid is okay, because it's very old and very smelly. It's extremely stinky. So that tells me that it's very, very old. So sorry, I have to keep waffling because the postman's here and we have the Alfie underneath the desk. We don't have any Betsy today. Betsy's upstairs. So I kind of would have liked Betsy to be downstairs, but never mind. So what we've got is just shush, Alfie. Oh gosh, no, Alfie, shush up. So we've got some little dots, and then the bigger the mushroom, the bigger the dots, kind of thing. That's what I'm trying to do. And I think on real mushrooms it's a splodge. I don't think it is technically a dot, so I've just kind of made mine into dots. But again, this is just a practice to see how the masking fluid behaves, because it is rather old and rather stinky. And I haven't used it for such a long time, so again, it's a practice. This is what I need to do. I haven't done this for a long time, so I need a bit of a practice. So this is easing me into it. So I'm going to do a bit of watercolouring, and then next week I will have a watercolour set. Alfie, come here, please. Come here. Come here. Alfie, come here. That's a good boy. Don't shake your head at me. Under there, thank you. Sorry. So I've just been drawing for about an hour, and he was as quiet as a mouse, but Alfie wants to destroy every video I make, so apologies. Apologies for the bad boy. So this tool I'm using is a colour shaper that I've been using for blending, and they use it for clay because the clay doesn't stick to it. When you're moulding clay, it doesn't stick. But originally, I'm pretty sure originally it was designed and made for artists to use with masking fluid, because you can either dry it, wait for it to dry, or you can just pull the whole lot off and leave the tool completely dry and clean. I have used a soft one, but that's all completely dry. Try not to get it up the end, because the same with pastels. But that's all dry now. So that's why these were originally made. Then they used them for clay because they thought, oh, nothing sticks to this. If you use masking fluid with your and you start off with a little bit, and then when you rub off with a little bit of it, it becomes an eraser. So I've just drawn very roughly. Now again, these are not going to be white because I've already done my background, but again, it's a practice. So this one is all dry now. So this was not shaken, this was shaken, and it saves you brushes. So what I want to do now is a really quick colour wash over the top, just to see how good this works. So this is part 2 really of the watercolour practice. Suzanne says, Alfie, be quiet and have a treat. I don't think it's in his nature to be a good boy. He doesn't know the words. Well, I wouldn't use this brand, Melody. Melody, that's what kind it is. This is Umbral, and this is for this. I must have bought this as a model show because it's Umbral, and it's probably for the acrylics they use. But you can get. We used to have white at college years and years ago, but now they do pink or they do blue. I think pink or blue, and I think you can get a watercolour one. Again, I think this one is a bit strong. I don't think it's designed for this. I think it's designed for something else. But there's a pink and a blue one. It's just easier to see. But years and years ago, I think we used cow gum. I think I bought some cow gum at one point. But so part 1, I go through all my colours. So this is cerulean blue, and it's dried a little bit, which is what I wanted it to do. So I'm just getting a bit of this blue colour here, and I'm mixing it in a bigger palette. The reason I didn't use this is it didn't have enough wells, so I haven't got too much of a colour now. So just go over there, and then because this is just a practice, I can go over here with this darker colour. Now when you normally do this, it's normally stuck down, or stretched is the correct term. So I'm going to leave that to dry. And I've got 2 lots of water. I've got dirty, I've got semi-dirty, and then I've got clean. And I'm always going to go in the clean one when I go to my colours, because watercolouring, you need buckets and buckets of water. So I'm just going to lean those on there, they'll be fine. In fact, I've actually got an old cloth that you can lean them on. A toweling is best. Toweling is probably best. So this is just a practice. I'm just going to put this on top to dry. So what you mustn't do is ever start colouring when it's wet. You must let your masking fluid dry. So 2 things to remember with masking fluid. Definitely do not use your best brushes. You could do it with the end of the brush and smush it round. Do not use your brushes, they will be trashed. The next best thing is the colour shaper, and they probably actually may show you how. As I say, this is not really the right one. It's a nice colour, but it's not the right one. There's a blue and a pink, and I've had mine for quite a few years, and I had to throw them away because they were solid. It's a good bucket, is that? So let's have a look. So the reason I'm doing this is so that I can have a practice today. So I'm going to practice with that. Now I did bring this Winsor Newton one out because I paid about £5 or £6 for it, and this is £140, but I decided to do it on the other one. So so next week I will be using that paper, but I'm going to do this today. I'm going to do a page in here, and I'm also going to do the pastel work in the mushroom book. And then I'm going to do a page in Magical Dawn, but I wanted to practice with watercolour today if I could do that. So that's actually dried, so I'm going to put again another colour over the top. What I might do actually is I kind of like this colour. Now you shouldn't really do it on here because it's going to run, but when I did my mushrooms I liked it 50-50, so we bring that alizarin crimson out. And that's really wet. And this is why these brushes are wonderful for watercolour but not good for colour pages, because when you touch down you get floods of colour. Now I've actually gone over there, but never mind. Unfortunately my hands are not very good today, so I'll just kind of, and there's far too much wet on there, but by the time I get around to everything else it should be nice. So this is just a practice. I need a practice because I haven't used watercolours for a long time, quite a few years, and it was frowned upon when I did my degree, so I did it anyway. So I'm hoping to return to my art class on a Wednesday, but of course it's dark nights now. But so you see it's getting, so you get used to the paintbrush of how you want to use it. And if this was a different colour you would definitely not touch this because it will run. You have to wait for it to dry. Now I did buy a heat gun a year or so ago and didn't think I'd be using it, so that will be coming out next week. So I think I'm going to have a play in watercolours, seeing as I've bought some really nice things. And I think I like the idea of watercolouring the mushrooms, so I can actually go back here and steal some colour if I want. And again I will be going through the different techniques so you can lift off colour while it's wet. You definitely wouldn't touch these two though. You wouldn't do this unless it was dry because it will run. Now if you want your colours to run, that's fine. If you don't, then it's a good idea to leave it. So I'm just doing this as a practice, getting used to the brush. Haven't used this brush ever before. I found them in a box that I bought for something else, I can't remember what it was now, and in the bottom were these brushes. There were some beautiful brushes, so again just trying to just mop up a bit of that so I don't have to go back. And again this brush is holding a lot of water. I'm just trying to find out which shade or tone I want. Again, no whites out, no black in that watercolour palette. I don't like black, I mix my own. If you do red, green and blue, if you have slightly more red you will have a warm black. If you have slightly more green you'll have a cool greeny black, and it depends on the blue. If you have more blue you'll probably get a Payne's grey, because some reds and blues make brown, and then if you add blue you get, so I kind of like that actually. So some are going to be stronger than others, so this one obviously is going to be the weakest. So although I'm feeling that I want to just mop up the bit of colour that I got. So again, this is just a practice. I want to see how well this old masking fluid does. I want to practice. Now what I should do really is turn that round, get more control over it. Perfect control over this brush. And it's a proper watercolour brush, so it's going to just do exactly what I want. It's not a rigger. It's not going to hold any colour. The more I touch, the more colour floods onto the page. Now, because that's dried, I can go up to it now. And again, turn it round so you have a perfect arc of your wrist to make that perfect. And learn to use the tip of the brush. You want the body of the brush to get the colour on, and then you want the tip of the brush to kind of manipulate it round. Oops. So while I've got there, this is dried almost, so that's another thing you could do. What I am going to do is just do that there, because I don't want that missing out. And you can go over it. Now you normally do light to dark, but I'm just practicing with the masking fluid. So I need to wash my brush out now. And then end up with the white clean water. Now what you could have, if you couldn't get up or you were a long way away or in the garden, have a bucket. Have a bucket of water. These brushes are wonderful. They are Isabey, and I think this has got France written on them, so there's a 0 and a number 2, but I haven't bought these. They were in my £28. I think they're about £10 each. There's a 0, number 2, Isabey, a 6234, Petit Graisse, France. And the other one doesn't have a name on it, but it was in that pack as well. It is a horse, it is I think it's a sable or a goat. This one says ox on it, Winsor Newton. It's an inch one, series 628, and that would do the same as this one for wetting. You need a big one for wetting. I will be playing with these. You can get the same effect, but it's just not as soft. This was a cheaper set that I bought. Now this one will go into that shape, but it doesn't have it has a bit of a tail to it to get a point. That's what you need. And this one is a round, it's a Royal and Langnickel, and it was about £10 for the set. There's 4 flats, there's 4 flats, see, 4 flats, there's a 20, there's a 22, a 20, an 18 and a 10, and then there's the rounds. There's a 24, a 16, an 8, a 6 and a 4, and there's what I call filbert. So it's flat but it's pointed. It's flat but it's got a rounded edge. So oops, and this set was £10 from the range. That would do you. The other ones which are very similar, and I didn't realise I had this but I used it last year, is these are Art Master Pearl Series 11, and again they do the same thing. You get that lovely point when you twist, you get that lovely point, so you can get some quite nice effects with it. So there's lots of different ones, but the watercolour ones, there's a lady called Isabel something or other, but I'll have a look at the watercolour ones. But you need a sable flat, and this is a 2 and a 0. Now the other thing you do need is a rigger. If you're doing trees or branches, you could do with a couple of riggers. So I was going to use these 3 brushes for next week, and I was going to use my Pro Art 6, I think it's 6, oops, I've rubbed it off, I think 6, 5 and 3, my riggers. Now they look like that when they're wet, when they're dry. Always look at a brush when it's wet, so you're going to have that really long, so you could do really long branches, anything thin, or if you wanted to do a fence post or wire or a fence panel, you've got that long stroke. So again, these watercolor brushes, when you touch, it floods out. When you touch with these, you only get the end, and it slowly releases, so you can get really long lines. And then the only other one I would have is my number 10 0 Art Master Pearl 55, and it's a liner. It's not really a rigger, it's a liner, so it's not quite as long. Actually, that's a series 55 one, so if I show you that one, there's a difference. Look, that's the difference. Not much. One's a 10-0 Graduate Daler Rowney liner, and one's a 10 Art Master Pearl 55 10-0. Both of them will be fine. I like the liner because you can just get some fine detail. So if I wanted to put a shadow on each of the little dots, I would use this. Sorry, Suzanne. I just read what she'd put, heat gun harder. I normally use a hairbrush, but I think I'm going to have to, since I've bought it. Oh, Suzanne says there's some on sale between $1 and $5. And the riggers, yeah, we like the riggers. I love the riggers because they're really good for colour books, because they don't do what this does. They don't flood. They just hold the colour and they give you just the amount you want. So that's almost dry. So let's have another look at this one. I'll pop that one up there. I've got a lamp up there. So this is the little bit of a water wash I did. So if you imagine that we'd done the sketch, we'd stretched the paper so it was wet and it was stuck down on a board. We would then put our masking fluid where we wanted pure white or a very pale. Anything paler than the background and the sky, you would cover in masking fluid. Now, some artists cover things in kind of as if you've got Photoshop in layers. So they would have the whitest thing out first, or they would white out all the mushrooms. If those mushrooms were going to be lighter than the background, you'd need to paint the whole of the mushroom. And then you do the wash, then you rub that off, and then you put the white for the lightest, and then you do your colour for your mushroom. Now I might do that, actually I might show you how to do that. So you can use lots of different layers with the masking fluid, and again that's probably what Photoshop layering does. You know, you can go over a layer and digitally you're not touching the original, so when you put them together the background is going to be on the background, whereas your things on top. Very similar, except for in reality you're using masking fluid. So let's see if this masking fluid is any good. Now I've got a tint, look, I've got a purple tint, so it's not going to be any good. If you can see, there is a bit of a purple tint. It's not the white paper underneath. So again, you might just want to buy white masking fluid. Now, all those little bits here, I'm going to roll together. Don't get rid of them, because it's magic stuff, is this. So what you want to do is to roll it together, if you've got proper hands, and after a couple of goes you end up with an eraser, and it's the easiest way to pick off masking fluid is to use a masking fluid eraser, because nothing sticks to masking fluid than masking fluid. But if you can see, it's worked, but I've got a tint. It's not as white as this. I have a tint because it's got colour in it. So you may want to just have plain white. I would be happy with plain white. I think the reason they did it is that people couldn't tell where they'd put the masking fluid and where they hadn't. So that's not going to be any good for my white dots on here because they're not going to be white. So I think that's after I shook it as well. So let's have a look at this. So this one's dried now. So let's have a look again. Get this little ball of masking fluid. Now my hands don't work very well, but what you'll find is it'll get bigger and bigger. Ow. And you just very carefully stroke it over the top. Now you can do it with a putty rubber, but if you want to get every scrap first time, nothing erases masking fluid like a little masking fluid homemade eraser. Now they probably sell them now, but you know, you can buy them. Why can you make them? Because you don't really want to throw this away. It's okay. So the little dots. Now this has worked quite well, and I don't think got a tint. So I think I used the masking fluid in the lid. I think. So to me, I think that looks okay. Let's see with the bigger spots what happens. Now you would just normally use it like you would an eraser, but my fingers won't hold it. So. And this is getting bigger and bigger, and you'll find that after a few times, depends on the size of your watercolour. But if you want to do lettering, you could just, and you wanted it a paler colour, you can use it for all sorts of things, masking fluid. It's wonderful. Again, years and years ago we had cow gum. I think I bought some recently. So those don't seem to have any purple in them at all. So what I could do next is take my smallest one, I think that's the smallest one I've got, and look at my professional watercolours. Again, it's just a practice, we're just having a play. Dip it in the clean water, make sure it's clean, and you do have a cloth as well just to twist it to a point. Depends how wet you want it. So I kind of like this yellow ochre. Now you wouldn't use a flat palette. It's just this is the only one I could find, and they are dry now, so it's fine. But this is just for colouring. If I was doing a wash, I did the wash in wells. You do need washes in wells for obvious reasons, because you want a lot of water and little colour. This way I want probably less. So I don't really want to mix. I don't think I want to change that colour. I think I kind of like that colour. So I'm going to do the mushroom. I'm not going to do the window if I can help it. And again, this probably isn't how you would do it, but it's not wet on wet. This is now wet on dry, because I want some nice crisp edges. So if you wanted some dark in there, you could drop a bit of dark in there if you wanted. Another way to do it is just wet one section. Now I'll go through this next week. I'm going to do all the techniques on my practice page. The other way to do it is let's do a smaller space there. So is to do wet on wet. Now again, it could so you wet the area and only that area that you want, And that's why these brushes are wonderful, because they release that water. They release the water. And you do need a heat gun if you're going to play with this, because... So what we've got now is we've got this colour, which is yellow ochre. It's probably a bit too much water on there. So the other thing you can do is, when you have the same brush, but it's dry, or dry-ish, is to twist it to a point and suck up some colour. Now, I'm going to be showing you that technique as well, but this is just to practice, because I'm so haven't done this for such a long time. So you can drop colour in, and that's why these brushes are so wonderful, because they release all that colour. And then what you can do is, and I probably would use a rigger, is just touch, don't know which colour I want actually, I think I want that one. It's just here, touch, where I want it dark, under the window ledges, and just under there. And if you wanted it darker, you could put a bit more. And this would work as well. So if you've got a light coming this way, this is going to be in shadow down there. Oops, down there. And then you need to leave that to dry, and it'll look completely different. So this is the dry way. It's a bit wetter looks, but you're not going to get that gorgeous mixture like you get here. And you'll see the difference of a crisp line or a soft line. So you can put this in. There's so many ways to use watercolour. Now I normally use it like this, quite wet on dry, but wet on wet is how you get some gorgeous, mystical, magical, soft colours like this. This is how you get wet on wet. It's not difficult, you just got to be a bit organised. Oh, sorry Suzanne. Yes, I was a bit like that when I was drawing my mushrooms and my toadstools. So I'm going to let that one dry. I don't know what I've got on here now. I've got yellow ochre. So the other way to do it is clean water, what am I going to do next? I can do all this one, so we'll do this one next. It's a bigger space, and remember wherever that water is. Now next week when I do this, the boards will be stretched on an old blackboard. I have a blackboard the children used to have numbers and letters on to learn the alphabet, and I find it absolutely perfect to hold a decent sized, so you don't have to go mad. If you can't find that, you could use it's not hardboard, I forgot what it's called. What do we call it? They use it in the back of cupboards. Hardboard, we call it hardboard. It's got a shiny side and it's got a dull side, and the dull side is rough, but the shiny side should be waterproof. So there's not a lot of water on there, and I'll just do it there as well. So I can then go into here and get the colour that I want. So I might just do that a little bit, and then kind of put that colour in, and again follow that, make sure that the brush follows where you're going. Now it's not too wet this, but it's a little bit wet, so you're going to get a softer effect. So if we wanted a highlight down there, what we could do is take a damp rigger and we can lift off a bit of colour. Now you can do it with a tissue, you can do it with a damp brush. So you can lift colour off, and then you can in fact I might use one of these actually. I think I might use this one. This is a 60, and it will go to a point, so it's and get a little bit of this colour into here to create a bit of a shadow. And you can tilt it, or you can do whatever you want to do. Now I kind of like mine flat, but it just gives you some indication of what you can do. And you can just add as much as you want. And you should get a lovely soft edge. You want to try and create kind of a bit of as it dries you get a different effect. So if it's very dry, you're not going to get very much of an effect. Again, that's going to look completely different when it's dried. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but this is why I'm practicing now. So I'm cleaning my brushes. And then clean water. The same with this one. Dirty, not so dirty, clean. Must have clean water. I think that's a really important rule. So I've got a bit of that. Put that there to dry and see what the other one's doing now. I don't know why I put that up there. So I've got a few more that I've been playing about with. Anybody got any questions? Is it a clapboard? I was really crumpy yesterday as well. So I'm having a bit of a play with that. I really want this to be flat, but I suppose I could mask off could have a look what time we've got. We've got 37 minutes now, so we're playing with masking fluid and a bit of colour. So if we do another masking fluid, it'll probably take me half an hour to do this. So I think a good shake is in order. I know the colour sits to the bottom, so if this was pink, it's normally pinky at the bottom. Now it shouldn't leave a tint, but I think this is because it's extremely ancient that's what it does it for. And I also want to do the windows as well. So I have been working digitally because my hands have been really bad. So I have a few digi-bits. So I'm just going to put that way and bake all the bubbles. I'm not going to work from here where I worked before because that's where I got the tint. Again, if you just rub, it comes off. It's very well behaved. So I'm going to just... Oh, that's the smallest one. Let me have a look for the other one. That's a pointed one, but this is quite soft, and this is just your so I'm going to try not to get it up into there because you really don't want it there. You just want to use the end. Now if you can't do that, use a very old paintbrush, or a child's paintbrush would do. That might be a bit small for these areas, But I'm pretty sure that this was originally, these blenders, before they became blenders, were designed for masking fluid, for watercolorists. And then somebody must have used them on clay and went, oh hey, clay doesn't stick to it either. So what you do is you just go around and very carefully, because if it starts to dry, again, I've not done this before, and I've certainly never used it with this before, but it seems to be working. And normally I don't think it's supposed to be quite as stinky as this. So it goes really thick and nasty when it's old, so if you're going to buy it when you're going to use it. So I think that's dried in the middle. Ow, sorry. So I'm going to just do all these. So there's always quite a lot of prep. Now normally when I pick up my watercolours I don't do any prep, and that's why I use riggers. But if you want to do it traditional way, so you could photocopy, and you don't need very thick watercolour paper, you can get away with it a bit thinner, that will go through a printer. So buy A4 size or A3 size and cut it in half, which makes A4, which is printer paper size, and then you can print your favourite colour page or photocopy it, or you can scan it in. I scan mine in because I do them digitally as well. Kills two birds with one stone. So we can kind of just do this. Now, as I say, I actually prefer white, but I've never seen any white for years. I must have bought this at a model show. So and I have purchased from a friend of mine an electric scooter, so I can get out and about. So I think that's going to be fun. So, but I think just this week we've got 2 model shows. Oops, you see there's too much on there, but that's fine. There's 2 model shows this weekend. We've got this weekend, and then we've got Halloween, where we'll be in Ireland. And so there's a bit too much on there. I'll try and get some of that off. I was thinking, oh well, that would be good because I can use my scooter and I don't have to sit behind the model show stall all weekend. And then I thought, well, actually I can, because I can do a lot of watercolours. So again, what I can do is I can get to this stage and prep a lot of pages ready to watercolour, and then I can actually watercolour away if I want. And remember that I have thousands of colours just in this section, because I've got 3 yellows, I've got 2 greens, I've got 3 blues, 3 reds. So I've got sap green, viridian, and I think there's another green. Oh no, I've got 2 greens. Cadmium yellow pale, yellow ochre. Now, some of these are professional watercolours and some are the Winsor Newton student grade. Burnt umber, burnt sienna, Elysian crimson, French ultramarine. That says sienna blue, I don't know if that's the right colour. Cobalt blue, a cadmium red pale, a cadmium red, crimson, cad yellow, cerulean blue, and there is a white up there. I don't think I've put black, but there is a white. So I can actually get a watercolour effect from these if I wanted to watercolour, because you really don't need a lot if it's professional. Yes, Susanna, I have to admit it's got the most pathetic little beep on it. I want an air horn. Suzanne says, I've got to put a bicycle horn on it for fun. I went, no, I want an air horn with these that really blast people out the way. Be naughty, wouldn't I? So every little window in my mushrooms has got a blob, and as you can see, it dries really quickly. And I could have, I think I'm going to, because this is an experiment, so I can do this. The others I'm working light to dark. But this one, if I colour all the, I don't think I'll do the leaves. Yeah, I could do the leaves as well. This is going to be dark red, so, oh, if it turns purple, it's not going to bother me. I think, oh no, that's not going to work, because I'm going to have to colour everything in then, aren't I? I think I might just do it pale, and then I can drop some dark in. That's what I'm going to do. This is a different way to do it. If I wanted to do a wash over all of it, and my mushrooms were lighter, and the paler mushroom in here is all going to be lighter than the background, because it's like a darkened wood, then I would have to mask out everything. So, but the other way to do it is to mask out the whites. I can then wet just the areas I want wet and work that way. So I think I might do that actually. So if I mask out the blackberries, I can then do some darker backgrounds without worrying about going in between all these little fiddly places. So I'm going to do that. Now again, that's going to take quite a while, but it'll be worth it in the end. So we can do two things. I can either get a child's brush that I don't care about wrecking, because this is taking a bit long. Now you see, look, it just slides off. And again, I'm going to put that on that little eraser that I've been making there. So what I might do is, what I may do, let me have a look at our little mushrooms. You see how lovely that is? And I've put any detail on it. It's just a wash. And you can re-wet areas and drop darker colours in. So I think I might have a play with that. I'll just do that really quickly, because this is near, it is dry. Now one thing you have to do is, has to be dry. If it's not dry, it's not going to work. So I'll just pop that to one side. So I'll bring these colours down. So I think I'm going to use the number 2 brush for wetting, and I'm going to drop the colour in with this brush and a rigger. Or maybe this one, because they are quite small spaces. You've got to choose the brush for how big the space is. That's probably the best. Oh yes, Suzanne, I will. Yep, I think so. But only problem is we can't get much stock in if I've got my big... It folds down into bits and pieces, and that's why my wrists are poorly, because I put it up myself to see if I could get it out the car, and of course lifting heavy things have hurt my wrists, but never mind. The good thing is I can only do it when I don't draw, because I can't draw for a while. So that was last week, so yeah, probably shouldn't have done that, but never mind. Right, so what I need to do now is, I think I'm going to put a little bit of dark purple in here. So again, different people use different techniques for colouring. I've never done this before, so this is just the way I'm going to do it for this practice. So I've got this pink, I think it was rose something or other, and I'm just going to touch a bit of this. Oh my goodness, look at that gorgeous colour. Now if I'd have used that red, I'd have got the dullest purple on the planet, but I'm using this one. I kind of like that, so now I'm going to use I'm actually going to use a smaller one, so I'm just going to touch here, because if I do all over, I'm going to move it. Remember, this is watercolour, and watercolour, yeah, that's not going to work because it's going to go on my mushrooms. So should have done it while it was wet, really, but never mind. I can always go over them. I can do two things. I should have done this before I pulled off the masking fluid, but never mind. You can put gouache on top of watercolour if you want. So that's wet on wet, and this is wet on dry. So you can see there's a difference. It's not going to be blended as nice. It's a bit more kind of sharper edged. Now, you can soften it. So once you've done that, you can touch the edge and it will soften it. You can move it about a bit. So you can do that. And of course this is watercolour paper, so it's going to be able to take quite a wet puddle. There's quite a wet puddle on there. But one thing I've got to do now is not to touch it, unless I want to make it a bit darker. This is when I can add my colour. Now again, you see this isn't a big enough watercolour brush. It's not doing what I want it to do. And it's not a real horsehair, so there always is a difference. Oh, hi Kenny, welcome to Benny's Designs. Anybody else popping in? Just having a play. I think I'm going to have to stick to my watercolour brushes because they do give the best kind of effect. So this could be our kind of fairly bright, warm glow. So that's wet on wet, and that's wet on dry. So we can just do that. And one thing I couldn't do, see, I'll show you what happens if you go to a place where you've already been, it's wet, you see it's running. So I'm never going to get that light. It's all going to run into there now. So this is just a practice to show you what you can do and then what you can't get away with. And I didn't clean the brush, so I've got that purple. And go back into the yellow. Again, I've got that beautiful colour, but if I touch up there, I'm going to lose it. And I think I might just make that one up. But that's not very wet. I can just do that one a bit more. And then when that's dry, I can drop a bit more in, but it's not going to like it. Now you can lift a little bit of colour, but it's always easier to add light to dark to light rather than trying to get some colour off to get a lighter shade. Oops, do a part of it. Sorry guys, it was the doctor, so I had to take it. So, right. So let me have a look. So you can build it up like this. It's just a bit wet, is that one? Because that's the one that was wet on wet. So let me have a look what we were playing with. There's another piece I was playing with, wasn't there? Right. So you could have some nice effects, or I kind of like the bigger ones actually. So I like to do the other watercolour effect is, instead of doing all over colour, is to do it wet on wet. So I might do that with this one. So I'm only using one colour, but it's stronger, so it's very similar to how we use it with the riggers. It's stronger at one end and then paler, but you get a better, you kind of do get an even keel. What have we got here? Again, we've got that, so we can use the wet, and I'm just twisting it to a point, so you can kind of be a little bit so there's you can see where I've wet there, and then you can drop in whichever colour you want. Again, I was using the yellow ochre, wasn't I think? So you can kind of touch your colour in, and it's really nice and well behaved. I think I've gone maybe a little darker there, but, and again, if you want it darker because you think, you know, it's, oops, and then you can just kind of put that colour down there. And then if you washed your brush, and then really clean water, and then really dried it on this cloth, oops, and you want it to a point, you can just very carefully just tease out some colour. To give you a natural hand. Oops. Again, these brushes, you know, they're water brushes, but they're not synthetic. Most of them are hog hair, and you can keep taking colour out to give you a really nice soft effect. And if you've gone wrong, you can wet something and take it off. So there's a lot of things you can do with watercolour, but you just have to have a bit of a practice, a bit of a play. Sometimes it's just nice to just have that play. And again, if you want that darker, you could go back into that. Now that again, we've now got, it could be a shadow. But the idea is that you need to play. You can either manoeuvre the colour wet on dry, and that's not wet enough, you see. If you see that it's not wet enough, so you need to go over it if you want the really lovely watercolour effect. Just dry it off a little bit, and then we'll put a bit of yellow ochre in there. and then drop a bit of this side. And you won't have any nasty lines, it will just mingle. Unless you want to create some lines. If you want to leave that to be darker under there, it will be darker under there. So you can always do things with the brush as well. And oops, that's quite dark, is that? So you can create really dark things. And remember, this is just the background. This is the background colour of this mushroom. There's no detail. There's no detail at all. So you let that dry, and then you can get some more detail in it. Oh, I haven't tried those, Suzanne. Suzanne says she likes the mixture. Yes, I've read about them. Of course, they're not as expensive as the expensive ones, but they're still got that lovely soft area. So, I could have a go at painting this. Now, I'm going to stop this particular video because we've gone for about an hour. So I've still got my watercolours here. If I want to make a wash, I'm doing it in little wells, and I'm just having a bit of a play with building up colours from very pale washes to strength. But I might do this one next in the next video. So thank you for watching my watercolour play with my old cloth and all my wet brushes. Thank you for watching.